My name is Selma and I'm here with my co-host Tasha. So we're thrilled to welcome today our speaker Helen Thom. Helen is a state registered biomedical scientist who began her journey with NHS BT as a placement student in 2012. Since then, she's built an impressive career across RCI, the patient blood management team, and hospital customer services. Helen has recently joined the NHS BT Pathology Business development team and is currently supporting collaborative models for integrated transfusion services between NHS Blood and Transplant and hospital transfusion laboratories as part of the Transfusion 2024 program. So today's session is titled RCI Assist, Spice Up Your Life, OBOS Having a Good Time. So RCI Assist is now live via the Spice and OBOS, and Helen will be walking us through how to use this referral support tool using real-life case examples from hospital transfusion labs. So before we begin, I'm just going to quickly do some housekeeping as usual. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. By staying on the call, you're consenting to be part of the recording. Feel free to subscribe to our channel and you'll be notified for any new videos and updates.
Lovely, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining me today. There will be some polls as we go through, so if people could take part in those, that would hopefully IT will play the game today because it doesn't seem to have been my friend recently. So RCI Assist, so spice up your life, OBOS having a good time. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing, just in case anyone's nervous, but if you want to sing along in your labs, you will be more than welcome to do so. So as Selma mentioned, I'm going to talk today about what RCI Assist is, but then how to use it. So people may have seen, I've talked about this, quite a lot over the last few months, people may have seen it. But it's come across as part of the initiative from Transfusion 2024. And it's a referral support tool that's been developed for use by hospital laboratory staff. So you can, when you're using it, it's basically there to help you sort of make a decision and guide you through a pathway when you're doing your serological investigations. And you'll ultimately sort of decide whether to resolve your case in-house or if it needs to go across to RCI. There's different pathways. So mostly today we're going to be looking at grouping and antibody identification. So I've got some real-life case studies, and I just have to thank Nicola Kirkham from Royal Derby who's provided me with the cases. And I'm going to show you how you navigate your way through, but it's really straightforward. You just answer the questions to your investigations, and it's sort of the mostly yes or no answers. There's different sections, so I'll show you how you can navigate your way around. There's support and information, so as you're going through, if you press on the information icons, it'll bring up information about a topic to help sort of decide what you're going to do next. And then, like I said, you'll reach a decision where you either manage it in-house, it goes in your limbs, or you refer to RCI. So it's available to access. So if you were to log in as Spice and you go under the resource tab, there's just a link there. So if you click on the link, you can go in via Spice, or you can go into OBOS. And if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a little tab there in the footer. Both are the same link, so it doesn't matter which one you use, just to make you aware. So we're just going to go through some cases. So the first one, we've got a 65-year-old male, group and screened. There's no blood being requested. They're in for a pre-op assessment. They've got a historical allo-anti-K. They were transfused 10 weeks ago. If you look on the limbs and Spice, there is results to show the patient's OBOS, big E neg, K neg, so they've had some phenotyping done, and they've got that allo-anti-K. They have been previously seen by RCI, and these are the results of your group and screen. So when you log into the tool, one of the pages that you will go on is your grouping page, and it's got a question there: is the ABO and D interpretable? You can see there's a little information icon on the box. So any of the boxes that have them on, if you press the button, it'll bring up a topic relevant to that box. So in this case, it's asking, is your ABO and D interpretable? So it's saying there, a forward and reverse group match, your ABO match in accordance with Landsteiner's law. There's a note there to say that neonate groups are considered interpretable from your forward group only, and your ABO forward group and your D show strong positive reactions. And there's a note there as well, just to say reverse groups might be weaker. So Just for information, so this isn't in the tool, but that's Mr. Carl Landsteiner. So Landsteiner's law is for whichever ABO antigen is not present on the red cells, the corresponding antibody is found in the plasma. It's basically what you're lacking on your red cells, you make the antibody in your plasma. That's why it's so important to get the ABO correct, because this is where you get your naturally occurring antibodies. Now, did Carl Landsteiner also say, if you want to be my donor, you better get with my antibodies? He did not. That was Ali Lloyd. So thanks, Ali, for that little suggestion. I have had rather a lot of fun putting this talk together. Oh, Ali. So the first question for you, so I'm going to launch the poll, is the ABO and D interpretable? So if you have a look at this group, hopefully you can see there that, is it yes, no, or you're unsure? So if you just want to take part, I'll just give you a minute just to answer that question. We'll see what the results are. I appreciate not everyone has access to polls and things like that. If you can take part, that's fab. So far, the majority are saying yes. Got 44. Oh, responses are creeping up there. Nobody said no, and there's a few who are unsure there. A few seconds there. 57 responses. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. So this is an interpretable group. So your forward and reverse ABO groups do match in accordance with Landsteiner's law, and you have in your D, you've got a strong positive reaction. So we're quite happy that this is interpretable. So if you look at the tool, you've got those yes or no buttons. So you just press yes because your group is interpretable. So you've answered the question, yes or no to those questions, and then it'll bring up the next box, which is go to your antibody ID section. So if you go onto the tool, you can go onto the tool at any time, by the way, as well. You don't have to just be working on an actual case. If you just want to go on and have a play around or do some practice cases, that's absolutely fine. So you press that button and it now takes you to the antibody ID section. So when you're in the tool, you've got 6 tabs across the top. Whichever tab you're in, it's sort of in bold and then the corresponding colour goes across. So now it's asking, is the antibody screen positive? And again, there's an information button there. So it'll just say, is your screen positive? And it's a positive result obtained by IET in your screen. So your turn again. I will just launch this one. So is this a positive antibody screen? And hopefully that isn't in your way, but you do have, you've got your 3 cells there. So cell 1, cell 2 and cell 3, is it positive or not? Oh wow, everyone was quick to respond there. Already got loads of responses. Fab, thank you. Yep, these are obviously very fast at doing these polls, quicker than me trying to launch them. Excellent. Yes, so the screen, it is positive for this one. So you have got positive result obtained by IET. Not every cell is positive, but it is classed as a positive screen. And I've just put the sheet in there for information. So we're saying yes, the screen is positive. So when you press that button, it brings up the next step. So the way we've tried to do it when we've developed the tool is that they'll answer sort of one thing at a time. Sometimes it does bring a few boxes up at the same time because there might just be a few points to consider. So the first one it brings up is refer to RCI. There's like anywhere with a little dashed line, you have an option if you may not necessarily refer, but you do have an option to refer. And here, this is a point where your lab may not hold antibody panel. So if you get a positive screen, you're going to have to refer to RCI. So we've just put that in as an option. But for the next one, it's now sort of a known antibody. If you press that information button, has the patient previously been tested and found to have red cell antibodies? So if we look at our patient here, we know that they've got a historical allo-anti-case. So that's where you're using your patient history to sort of navigate your way through. So we're going to say yes. When you press yes, it asks if your positive screen is due to a known pan-reactive antibody. Notice that doesn't say pan-reactive allo-antibody, just pan-reactive antibody. So again, the information box there, positive result, pan-reactive screen. And in this case, it's not due to pan-reactivity. You'll see later on why we asked this question. So we're going to say no, so you press the no button. Now what it's doing is there's a prompt to perform an antibody ID panel. So this is just following your normal procedures, and a lot of what's already in the tool, you're probably thinking, well, I do this anyway, Helen, but it's in there, and we think this would be a really good training tool for somebody as well, sort of helping to follow those steps in the lab. So you perform your primary panel. This is just in accordance with your local procedures. So everything contained within RCI Assist, it's built around the BSH guidelines, and there's advice in there to follow your own procedures. It is very much just there as a referral support tool. So this is our panel. Normally I'd love to spend loads of time going over how we get all the interpretations and exclusions and things like that, but just for use of promoting the tool, I'm going to kind of skip ahead. But this, sorry, I missed a question off there. So what it's asking you when we move on is, has a pan-reactive antibody been identified by IET? So you've done your panel, is it pan-reactive? In this case, if you look, so I've highlighted those in just red, it's not pan-reactive because pan-reactive would be where everything there was positive. So it's not pan-reactive, so we're going to answer that question. Not pan-reactive, nope, press that button, and it brings up the next step. So you can see just that following on stepwise. So here it asks you questions around your investigation. So it wants to know, have you identified any antibodies? Have additional clinically significant antibodies been excluded? Is your patient pregnant? And has this patient previously been seen by RCI? Depending how you answer these questions, it's going to take you off down a different pathway. There's also been some hints and tips put in here just to help you with your investigation. So it's saying, it's good to know your clinical significance of antibodies. That's within your BSH guidelines. Confirm the antibodies as alloantibodies by performing your antigen phenotyping. Things like, don't forget what shows dosage, because all these things can be used just to assist your investigations. And remember which antibodies, which cells are sort of destroyed by enzymes when you're doing your exclusions. Think about cold reacting antibodies. Sometimes you might just get some scruffy reactions when you're doing things by IAT, and it could be that it's an antibody that's reacting coldly. And sometimes you can get pan-reactivity in enzymes, which can just sort of interfere with IAT. So it's just things to think about when you're doing your investigations. So going to those BSH guidelines, when you want to say, have we identified an antibody, you can only assign an antibody specificity when you've got 2 positive examples and 2 negative examples of that antigen. And when you've identified an antibody, it's really important to exclude the presence of any other antibodies. In particular, your kids, your S's, your Duffies, they need to be excluded by cells which contain homozygous expression. But you only need a single example to exclude antibodies. So if we go back to our case now, this is what we're looking at. So you can see here we've got, and I've put probable anti-K, anti-GK. I'm saying probable because I haven't confirmed the presence of them yet. So I can't say that they're alloantibodies. And I haven't excluded anti-KP and CW. I will make these panels available for people as well if you want to go through later and have a practice. So what do you really, really, really want to do next? Again, I won't sing, so I will launch this. So if you just put, this is just a word cloud. If you just want to pop in, if this was, how would you what would your next steps be? I'll start off, just saying you might want to put some extra cells up. Yeah, phenotyping, extra cells, second panel, yep, antigen typing, fab. Yep, secondary panels, phenotype, yep. Yep, second panel, MBS panel, enzyme IAT. Really good answers, fab. Different panels, yep. Excellent. So you see everyone's kind of on the same page. So fab, thank you very much for that. Excellent, thank you. I'm just going to stop that there. Great. So Zigga Zigga, really good suggestions, and thanks to Laura from Gateshead with the Zigga Zigga. So here I've just taken a look at the screening cells because you have those screening cells available to you. So you can see there, looking at your screening cells, you can exclude CW because this screening cell, because I made it, happens to be CW positive, and I've got a negative reaction there by IAT on cell 1, but it's not helping you in terms of the KPA. But you know, you can still see you have got other things going, your other antibodies, you can see that they are there. So it's not really helping you with the KPA anyway, but you've got one extra exclusion. So I'm going to launch the next question now. So in terms of transfusion, or KPA, oh, I don't know, my poll has seemed to have frozen there. Hopefully you can see that. I can't see whether it's actually on. Oh, no, it worked. So are anti-KPA and anti-CW clinically significant antibodies in transfusion? So for your blood selection, kind of, you're thinking. So just yes, no, or you're unsure. Most people saying no. It's creeping down a little bit there. And some are unsure and some are saying yes. Again, really quick on the responses there. Great. Oh, wow, up 60 responses. So I'm going to stop that there. So thank you very much. So the majority of people are saying no. So if you weren't sure, what you could do is this is where you would go and check your BSH guidelines. And if you look in the BSH guidelines there, I have put in the K and the JK because that's what we've identified. Potentially, I've put those in, they are clinically significant. And to answer the questions, if you go in the BSH guidelines, CW and KPA was saying no. Oh, fab. Thanks everyone for that. So when 2 become 1 in RCI, so the first time you identify an antibody, you need to have those 2 positives and 2 negs, but actually on subsequent sort of like your confirmation, you only need 1 just to confirm the specificity of a previous reported antibody. If exclusion is not possible, then we'd basically say, well, yeah, we can't exclude these, but you know, so just for me here, this is when you're doing your inclusions and exclusions, let's not worry if we couldn't exclude that anti-KPA. You wouldn't need to actively go and exclude it, but obviously you would, in terms of the hospital transfusion lab, you would just follow whatever your local procedures would be. So going back to our first panel now. So we've got this, we're looking like we've got an anti-big K and a JK. For the K, we can say that it's there because we've got 2 positive examples and 2 negative examples. For the JK, we can also say that it's there because we've got 2 positive examples and 2 negative examples. You wouldn't be able to use these cells which I've highlighted here because they are positive for both of the antigen. And on the bottom one there, we don't know if the KPA is there or not because it's masked by the anti-JK, but we're not really worried about it. So, or I wouldn't be. So let's just move on with that. So now we're going to go back to those questions. So have you identified any antibodies? So if we look here, have I identified any antibodies? Yes, we have, because we're saying it was a probable anti-K and JK. Haven't done any phenotyping yet, but I have got those 2 positives, 2 negs, so I'm seeing that the presence of them there. So we have identified them. We have excluded any additional clinically significant antibodies because we haven't excluded KPA, but we're not worried about it because we're saying it's not clinically significant. It's fab. The patient's not pregnant, but they have been seen by RCI. So this is how you answer the questions here. So we'll press yes to 1 and 2. And here it brings up, remember I said sometimes it brings up a few little boxes. So the first one, there's a sort of check results. So this one's just saying if you suspect it's an Rh system antibody with a positive auto, you may need to consider the patient's ethnicity because they may need to go to IBGRL. This is a box where you're probably never really going to use it, but we've had to put it in there just in case. So if you did, there's some information there about you would need to refer this patient off to IBGRL for possibly some sequencing. There's an optional retrospective referral to RCI. So if you wanted to, you could refer this to RCI. So we've put this in here if you chose to press that. And it's just saying there, you've said yes to 1 and 2, so you're happy that you know what it is. You've excluded everything else, but I just want a bit of confirmation. So That's an option if you want it. What we're interested in is this box at the end here, asking if the patient's been transfused within the last 3 months. So if we look at our patient history there, yes, they were transfused 10 weeks ago. So we're going to say yes. So you press that button, and now it's saying add a comment on your patient history, because this is saying you can't phenotype this patient. So we know we have a historical allo-anti-K. We've already phenotyped the patient when they've been in previously, but they've made a new anti-JK, but we can't phenotype it because that patient's been transfused within the last 3 months. And then there's some information here as to why it's important that we want to not phenotype patients when they have been recently transfused. It's basically got dual populations of cells, and it's important to be able to correctly report the specificity of an antibody. So is it an allo-antibody? You don't want to incorrectly call something and select antigen negative blood or antigen positive blood if you got it wrong. So here there's just adding a comment on your patient history. So however you would put this into your system, but basically performed phenotyping on the JK in 3 months post-transfusion. So that's that one. So the next one, it asks if the patient's pregnant. So you've already said no, but what we've done is with the tool, sometimes it does repeat the question a couple of times. And it's just to make sure that you haven't missed anything. So this patient isn't pregnant, but if you wanted to look, there's some information there about why it's important to exclude antibodies in pregnancy. But our patient's not pregnant, so we're going to say no. Now it's taking you to the elution section because the patient's been recently transfused, so it's going to move you to elutions because it wants you to consider whether it needs an eluate or not. So if you press that button, it takes you to the elutions page. You could just go in and press the elutions tab if you wanted to. There's some information held within this of when RCI will perform an elution. But the first question it asks you is, has your patient been transfused in the last 6 weeks? So this patient was transfused 10 weeks ago, so we can't perform phenotyping, but the patient hasn't been transfused within the last 6 weeks. So we're going to say no. And now it's going to take you to the transfusion section because it doesn't need an elution. So even though it's been recently transfused, it's made a new antibody. There is a point to note here that if the patient's having hemolytic transfusion reaction, you would want to be doing an elution on that. But in this case, they don't need one, so that's fine. Is a transfusion required? Nope, no blood's requested for this. So we're going to say no. And then it brings up a box just to say input onto your limbs. You input on the limbs following whatever your policy is to input onto the limbs. So you can see here, quite a complex investigation. There seems to be a lot of stuff going on. You can't phenotype them because they've been recently transfused, but they don't need an elution. So actually you've managed to resolve that serology. And this was resolved on one panel in the screening cells as well. So that's it. So stop right now. I need somebody with a reset button. So when you're using the tool, if you look in the top left-hand corner, there is a reset button. So RCI Assist will remember all of the pathways that you've taken. So when you're going to use it for a new patient, it's really important to reset it. So if you press that button, it asks if you want to reset. So if you press it out of curiosity, you do have a get out of jail free card because you can say no and it'll just return you to where you were previously. And if you press yes, it takes you back to the beginning, ready to start afresh on a new patient. So we'll move on to the next case. So we've got a 75-year-old male, group and screen, this time they want 2 units of red cells. They're anemic. They haven't been seen by your lab, but they were transfused at a different lab 3 weeks ago. So you've gone on to SPICE and there's some results available. The A-pos, big E neg, K neg, and there's got no historical antibodies, and they have been seen by RCI. So again, we've got our group and our screen there. So the first question asks here, is ABO and D interpretable? This one I'm not asking you, I'm just going to skip ahead. So yes, the group is interpretable. We've got POSH-SPICE helping us out for this one as well. So we're going to say yes because the group's interpretable. So you go to the antibody ID section, and as you're going through it, I know the first time I've spent a lot of time sort of explaining what all the buttons and things are, but you can see it's really straightforward to navigate your way through this. So is the screen positive? Yes, your antibody screen's positive. You've got those positive results by IAT. Excellent. We'll press yes. So it brings up those boxes. we do panels, we're not going to worry about that first pop-up. Does the patient have a known antibody? So if you look at the patient's history, whilst they've been seen previously, they have no historical antibodies. So we're going to say no. Press that button, we're back to perform that primary panel. So all of the pathways are really the sort of interlinking. So you may see the same pathway again, but you can get there lots of different ways. So we'll look at our panel. Hopefully you can see there. So it's asking, is it pan-reactive? No, it's not, because not everything is positive. So we're going to say no. This time, again, it's bringing that box up. So we'll have a closer look at our antibody investigation. And this time, we've got a big S and a JK. Like I said, these are real cases from the lab as well, because sometimes I do make cases up, but these are genuine cases. So we've got a probable anti-big S and JK, and we haven't excluded anti-LUA. So next question, I can launch this. Is anti-LUA clinically significant in transfusion? Just give you a few moments to answer that. Got some yeses this time. Majority say no, some are unsure. And again, the beauty of not being sure about these things is this is what the BSH guidelines are for, is that you can just go and have a look. So that's fab. Loads of good responses coming in, thank you. Excellent. So most people are saying no. So I'm going to put done for that one. And again, just check your BSH guidelines. Similar to your LUA and KPA, it's not likely to be significant in transfusion. So let's not worry about anti-LUA. So we'll go back to our panel here. Looking at the big S, we do have 2 positive examples and 2 negative examples. Great, that one's brilliant. We don't need to do anything else about the big S, not at the moment anyway. Then we're looking at with JKA, you've got 2 positive examples, 2 negative examples. Fabulous, we've got the exclusions and inclusions that we need. And again, I've just highlighted those ones there where you wouldn't be able to use those cells because they're antigen positive for multiple antigens, and then you've got that LUA that you haven't excluded either. So brilliant. So looking at these now, we're saying yes to 1 and 2 because we've identified antibodies and we've excluded clinically significant. The patient wasn't pregnant. So let's move on. We'll skip past those first 2 boxes and we'll just go, right, has the patient been transfused within the last 3 months? Looking at your history, they weren't transfused at your lab, but they were transfused at a different hospital 3 weeks ago. So we're going to press yes. Again, we've got this add your patient comment because you can't perform any phenotyping. So for this one, we'll just be calling it a not specified anti-big S and JK because we can't do any phenotyping for that dual population of cells. Let's perform some phenotyping 3 months post-transfusion. And just a little reminder that we haven't excluded anti-LUA. So the patient's not pregnant, so we'll press no for that. And again, we're going to be taken to the elution section. So we've got that, check your patient history. Has the patient been transfused within the last 6 weeks? So this time they have been transfused because within the last 6 weeks because they were transfused 3 weeks ago. So we'll press yes. So the next pop-up for this one is the auto control positive. If you press that information icon, it'll bring up information around sort of a positive auto when a patient's been transfused in the last 6 weeks can indicate the sensitization of donor red cells, therefore the formation of new antibodies. It's in here, please note that if the auto control is negative and the patient has hemolysis, it's advisable to perform an eluate in the absence of a positive DET. So while this can guide you of what you need to do, sometimes it's not there to replace any user judgment. Sometimes you do just have to make a judgment call and go, actually, the auto control is negative, but this patient has hemolysis, they're going to need an eluate. And using RCI Assist doesn't prevent you from having a conversation with somebody in RCI. It's there to sort of guide and help support those decisions, but it's not there to replace sort of any of those. So is the auto control positive? So I'm going to launch this. So if we just have a look, so that's your panel there, and I have circled the auto for you. So is the auto control positive? Everyone's saying yes so far. One saying no. I'm gonna go. I've almost got 60 responses there, so I'm going to stop. So the auto control is positive, so you can see where I've circled, and you've got a 3+ reaction. That is the grading for that positive. So the patient's own red cells are positive against the patient's own plasma. So that's what an auto control is. Fab. So if we press yes, it brings up the next sort of set of options here. It can look a little bit scary, but it's not. So then it's sort of saying right here, we need to perform a DET. Oh, I thought I had an information icon on there, but yeah, sorry, I've obviously missed a button off there. But with this, it's just saying, it's basically just telling you what a DET is. And when it's positive for IgG, that's when we're going to be wanting to do a dilution. So here, if you have a look at this, and I'll launch the next question, is the DET IgG positive? Excellent. People straight in with a yes. Brilliant. So very fast in the polls today. Fab. Everybody saying yes. Yes, the DAT is positive for IgG. So we're going to move along to the left here. So it's IgG positive. So there's an information button here saying, if eluates are performed in your laboratory, please follow your local procedures. Otherwise, please refer to RCI. So the majority of labs probably don't perform elutions in-house, but if you did, you would perform your elution, review your result, and then depending on what you find in your elution will depend where you go next. But because this is a real case, this was referred to RCI, so goodbye my sample. So at this point, your investigation's done, the patient needs an elution, this lab didn't perform elutions in-house, it went off to RCI. So this time, pretty similar story to the first patient, but depending on the time of the transfusion is going to depend what happens with it next. So excellent. So we've still got about 20 minutes left, so I'm just going to plow on. So case 3, so we've got a 54-year-old male, group and screen, they don't want any blood, they've been in a road traffic accident, they've not been seen by your lab, you go on to SPICE, there's no record of it, they haven't been seen by RCI, and you know that this patient has never been transfused. And this is the group and screen results. So the first question that it's going to ask you is the ABO and D interpretable? So over at the baby SPICE for this one, and so I'm just going to launch that now. So is the ABO and D interpretable? Do the forward and reverse groups match in accordance with Landsteiner's law? So far, most people are saying no, creeping up a little bit there in the yeses. So 90% of people are saying no, they don't match. So we've got over 60 responses there, so I will just stop. Thank you very much. So actually this time, the forward and reverse groups do not match in accordance with Landsteiner's law. So you can see there, if this was, so the forward group is looking like it's a B neg. So with a reverse group, we would expect there to be nothing going on. You wouldn't expect any sort of anti-B in the background, in the back group there, but something is going on. So there is a reaction in your reverse group that's an unexpected reaction. So this time the group is not interpretable. So we're going to press no. Now it's asking you to check your patient history. So has a patient been transfused within the last 3 months? Press that information icon. It's saying a previous transfusion is the most likely source of an anomaly with the ABO or D group, and consider any type of transfusion. So that might be red cells, platelets, FFP, IVIG. So it's just a little sort of, it's that educational prompt of like, you know, if your patient has been transfused, think about the products. It's not just your red cells. But it is saying there dual populations arise in the case of red cell transfusion. So the ABO and D group may not be identical. And whilst unexpected reactions may occur in the reverse group following transfusion with plasma products. So our patient has never been transfused before. So we're going to say no. So the anomalous group is not due to a transfusion. So when you press no, it brings up the next box, which is the reaction versus anti-D equal to 2 plus or less? This is kind of taking you down sort of D variant territory. But if you look at our patient, it's D negative, so it's not equal to 2 plus or less. So we're going to say no. Press that button, and now it's saying check your patient history. Can the ABO anomaly be explained? So there's an information button here. And it's like things to consider, similar to your antibody investigation. Is it a neonate? Have you done a reverse group when you could have got away with not doing a one because you wouldn't do one on a neonate? Is it an ABO subgroup or something, you know, like really weird and wonderful? Look at your antibody history or even your antibody investigation. Is it a known cold or room temperature one that could be interfering with your reverse group? Has a patient had a transplant? Are they on monoclonal antibody therapy because some drugs can interfere with your grouping? And what's the patient diagnosis? Because various things like AML can actually interfere as well. And has it previously been investigated? So if you've got a known subgroup, you know, you can kind of like, you can go, oh yeah, we can explain what that is because this patient is a known XYZ. So what are any thoughts on what it might want to be? I'm going to leave this one open to you. So it's just another word cloud. So you can just type in what you think it might be. Could it be diagnosis? Could it be something's going on with the antibodies? Oh. Not sure if someone was shouting cold antibody there, but I had my caps lock on. It hasn't come across. So, yep, IgM antibody, cold reacting. Yeah, so everyone's kind of thinking the same as me, that it's could be something cold. Could be a subgroup. Yep, you're absolutely right. Whoever's put that. Excellent. Possible treatment. Yep. So it could, you can't, while you can sort of hazard a guess, you can't actually say what it is. So we're going to have a little look at this. So thanks for everyone for inputting onto that. So thanks again, Zigga, good suggestions. So with RCI Assist, if you remember, I said you can actually move your way around this. So it's not static, it's not fixed. If you press yes when you should have pressed no, you can go back and press it, that's fine. And you can navigate your way around each of these tabs, because when you leave a tab, it remembers what you were doing previously. So it'll save all that information. You haven't reset anything. So for this one, it's looking, we're all kind of on the same page. We think something's cold's going on. So let's go and have a look at our antibody ID rather than saying, oh, we don't know what it is, we don't know what the group is. Is it an antibody that's interfering? So if you press the antibody ID tab, is your screen positive? Yes, this screen is positive. So we'll know that. Thanks, Baby Spice, for that. Does the patient have a known antibody? So we're looking up a history here, and there's no record. They've not previously been seen by your lab. There's no record on Spice, and they haven't been seen by RCI. So nope. All right, time to do a primary panel here. Have I identified a pan-reactive antibody by IAT? So this is the panel in this case. So if you look here, we've got lots of zeros. So there's definitely not a pan-reactive antibody going on here. So we're going to say no. Now it's going to ask you those questions again. So we'll go back to the panel. So what we do have here is on cell 1 and cell 8, we have a 1+ reaction by IAT. It's negative by enzymes. So what I'd be starting to think here is, this is looking like it's something cold, because your M's, your N's and your S's, they're destroyed by enzymes. M's and N's in particular could be cold antibodies. Could we be looking at something like that? But we can't really say what it is because we've only got 2 positive reactions. But this is where that sort of pot of information comes in. So don't forget about things that don't forget about antigen dosage of cells. Remember which cells are destroyed by enzymes. So having a look and going, oh yeah, that's gone by enzyme. What about your cold reactive antibodies like your M's and things like that? So it is just, that's what those hints and tips are there for. So I'm going to launch the next one. So what might you do if you suspected you had a cold antibody? I'll just put my response in and then Yeah, another panel, warm up your reagents, cold panel, yeah, room temperature panel, warm up your sample, yeah, it's a good one. Sample and cards, phenotype your patient, yeah, excellent. Ink pre-warm panel, brilliant. Lots of different things there. That's looking really good, thank you. So everyone's on the same page here, you know, we are looking at the sort of doing something to our panel. So not a second panel, just doing something with the current panel. And fab, thank you everybody. And this is what was done, so great suggestions. So in this case, a cold panel was done. I don't know how that cold panel was done because I didn't perform these investigations, but you can see there that doing that cold IAT, it's an anti-M. It does show dosage on one of the cells. It's actually missed some of the homozygous cell lines as well. But when you've got it in the cold panel there, you can see that it is that anti-M. What you could do with your group as well is, because don't forget, it's not just the panel, it's the group. So we know this cold antibody that we're now looking is most likely an anti-M. Is interfering with the reverse group. So you could, whatever your local policy would be, try and resolve that. You know, pre-warm, immediate spin, that kind of thing. You could try and do that. So in this case, we've had a look, we've gone and had a little look at a panel. We haven't finished that investigation yet, but now I'm going, well, actually, I've worked out what it is. I'm going to go back to my group and I can resolve it because I've done whatever to that to resolve the group. So brilliant. Yay, I can input the result of the ABO on the limbs. There is a pot of information here saying, you know, it depends on what your policy is. It might be in your policy that you would have to refer it to RCI. And if that was the case, then that's fine. But whatever your local policy is on discrepant groups, we have resolved this, so you've put it in your limbs. But when the input's complete, consider the results of the antibody screen and continue through the tool. So you might want to resolve your group first and then go and do your screen and your panel. But because you can jump around, you've got the option to use it however best suits you. So we'll go and finish our investigation now. So you've got your antibody ID, got a cold panel. So we're confirming we've got 2 positive anti-Ms, 2 negative anti-Ms. So we can say great, we can confirm the presence. So press that button, we're saying yes to 1 and 2 because we've excluded everything else as well. Has your patient been transfused within the last 3 months? No, they've never been transfused. So we're going to press no this time. So here it's saying fab, you can perform phenotyping. If it's not already known, so that one previously they had a known anti-big K, so that you wouldn't need to do the K phenotyping again. This one's not known, so would need to do it. Here it's saying, you know, why it's important that we determine that antibodies are alloantibodies, for example. A positive auto might interfere, you might get positive interference with your IgG anti-serum and stuff like that. So again, just information to try and support that investigation. There is even an option here. You may not hold the phenotyping reagents in-house. So there's an option. So it might need a phenotype, but you might not be able to resolve it in-house just because you don't have the anti-sera. So at that point, you could refer to RCI. So I'm going to ask you now. This is just purely out of interest for me, really. Do you perform phenotyping in your laboratory? So do you not? So you don't perform it. You just do ABO and D. You either or you perform extended RH and K, but no additional typing. So you might do like your D, big C, little c, etc., but not like your Duffys or anything. You might do that and some additional typing, or you do the whole lot. No, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just me being nosy. It's a pretty mixed bag there, then, isn't it? So interesting. The only reason that I'm asking is because some people would refer at this point. Some people wouldn't be able to go any further because they don't have the anti-sera. And some would manage it in-house. So thank you for that. But in this case, Mama, we stock you. Mama, M negative. Mama, hello, anti-M. This probably would sound much better if I was singing it, but you really don't want to hear me singing on these. So this lab actually did the phenotyping, so they would continue on through the tool. The patient's not pregnant, Do they want any blood? No, they don't want any blood for this patient, so we press no. And then here it's just saying input. You can just input on your limbs. And there is a little bit of information just to say follow your local policies there. So because I don't want any blood, you can just input on the limbs. So we're all done. So you've had a FAF with your group, you've had a FAF with your panel, but actually it might seem complicated on the face of it, but again, you've just been able to use the tool just to navigate your way through. What I'm going to show you here, so you can see there's a little print page button at the bottom. If you press that, it'll take a screen capture of whatever you're looking at on that particular screen. So here it's showing me antibody ID. So if I was using this for, I don't know, say if I was doing my specialist portfolio, I could screenshot my case, print this, save it as a PDF, annotate it and use it for evidence. Because it remembers where you've been previously, you could then go on and show how you've managed to resolve your group. Or you could give it, if you're doing competencies, just any way you might want to use this in the lab, just to let you know that functionality is there if you want it. So I'm hoping that this is spicing up your life and that you're having a good time. These are the Spice Girls, by the way, just in case anyone did wonder why I had 5 women in very short lab coats, but it is the Spice Girls, thanks to Copilot. They've become biomedical scientists. So I'm going to go through one more case, which hopefully won't take too long. And then we'll just a couple of minutes for questions at the end, if that's okay. So we've got a 54-year-old female, group on the screen, 2 units of red cells requested for PV bleed. You've not seen them, there's no record on Spice, there's no historical antibodies, and they've not previously been seen by RCI. So is your group interpretable? And we've got Mel C helping me out this time. Oh, she looks a bit jaundiced, might be a bit unwell. So this one, the group is interpretable. So we're going to just move on, and you'll notice I'm trying to get through this a little bit quickly, so I do apologise if it seems like I'm rushing. So your group's interpretable, so we're saying yes. There we go, press the button to go to the antibody ID section. Is the antibody screen positive? Yes, the antibody screen is positive. Not overly strong reactions, but they are positive. So we're going to say yes. Does the patient have a known antibody? Nope, they've got no historical antibodies, so we're going to say no. Getting into primary panel territory here, so we're going to do a primary panel. Have we identified a pan-reactive antibody by IAT? You can see there are some negative reactions on here, so it's not pan-reactive. So nope, not pan-reactive. Let's have a look at these questions now. So we'll take a closer look at the panel. And here's one I did earlier. So we have, unfortunately, the button is in my way. So we've got an anti-Duffy and an enzyme little anti-C, anti-little c. Can't exclude anti-LUA. And I've also put here, you can't exclude enzyme anti-big E. You can exclude it by IAT. I just sort of left it open just to give her a little bit of something to think about while we're doing this case. So looking at this panel, we're saying, right, well, for your Duffy, you can only now get 1 positive example and 1 negative example. So while it's looking that it's there, we've only got 1 pos, 1 neg, and you require at least 2 examples, as we've discussed in the other cases. So this time, I'm sorry, and going back to the little c, I've just skipped past that, and we've only, with a little c, we've got 2 positives, but only 1 negative. So have we identified any antibodies? Well, you can't actually say that they're there, so we're going to say no this time. Have you excluded any additional clinically significant antibodies? Well, yes and no, but not quite, because that big E's potentially still hanging around. Is the patient pregnant? No. And has the patient previously been seen by RCI? Nope. So this time we're going down a different pathway. So we'll say no to 1 and 2. The next prompt here is secondary panel. Have you got a secondary panel available? And if you look at the information, it's saying in a lot of cases you might get the answer that you need by performing a secondary panel. But actually, there's going to be some times where performing a secondary panel isn't going to give you an answer. So if a patient, for example, has got an anti-little e, at that point, you'd just be wanting to refer to reference. So this information, it's a sort of guide to help you, and it's going to depend what's going on in the patient's plasma. So we do have a secondary panel, and we've decided that we're going to have a look at that to see if it helps with. And it does, it gives us the other Duffy confirmation that we need, and it gives us the extra antenatal C as well. But still, we have actually managed to exclude anyway as well, but we're still, are we worried about that enzyme only anti-Big E? What do we want to do about that? So this is where I'm kind of just going to have a little think about it. So I want you to say what you, so I want you to holler to see what, is there anything else that you would want to do? Some in there. Yeah, phenotype RH, type the patient, yep. Yep, send to RCI, that would be fine. RH and K phenotype. Excellent. Most people there, same phenotype. Nice big answer in the middle. Brilliant. Thank you. I think everyone's, a lot of responses there. Thank you. I think we're all on the same page. So you can either phenotype or you can refer to RCI. So in terms of using this, again, Zigazag, good suggestions. Thank you. You've also got your screening cells if you wanted to have a look at it. But what I would say is there's no need to actively exclude the enzyme anti-Big E, because when you find an RH antibody, when you're looking at your BSH guidelines, and those tips are saying it's good to know your BSH guidelines, once you've suspected an RH antibody, you should be doing extended RH phenotyping. Just remember to check your patients being recently if they've been recently transfused. You could refer to RCI to resolve this, but it was an enzyme only anti-little c, and the little c neg panel that RCI hold is IAT only, so actually it wouldn't make any difference if you referred this. They'd just be saying to you, well, we've phenotyped the patient, we can't exclude the presence of Big E. You could check your screening cells, but they're IAT only, so they're not actually going to help you. So we've said, right, has using the secondary panel helped to resolve it? Have we got where we wanted to be with that? So we're saying yes, because we're happy. And you can see now it's taking you back to where we were previously. So we're interested, has your patient been transfused? And when I looked at this one, I was putting it together, I was like, oh, we don't actually know. So you can just give the ward a quick call and they'll be able to tell you that this patient's never been transfused. So we're going to say no. Then you've got those options again to phenotype the patient. So if you didn't hold, say, Duffy anti-sera, you would want to refer to RCI at this point. But this lab happens to do everything, so that's fine. And again, I've just reiterated there about having to do those extended RH phenotypes. So they do the RH and K and the Duffy. So the patient's Duffy and egg. Just put a point in to remember about looking at your auto control when using IgG anti-sera. The patient's R1, Duffy and egg and K neg. So the Big E neg, so we're going to be giving them Big E neg, even though we haven't said whether that antibody was there or not. The blood is all right for that. And they've done a second sample and confirmed that they're A pos. Brilliant. So they're not pregnant. Do they want any blood? Yes, they do. So we're going to go to a transfusion section. So if you press that button there, it'll take you to the transfusion section. It does look slightly different to the previous one because depending on where you come in from, the page may not look exactly the same every time. The patient hasn't been transfused within the last 6 weeks. If they had, it would take you to think about elution. Do they want any blood? Yes, they want 2 units of red cells. So we're going to say yes. We're going to ask here sort of what cells do you want to select? You're selecting ABO and D&K compatible, antigen negative for any clinically significant antibodies, and in line with any special requirements. This would also include the provision of Big E negative to match the RH for this patient. So I'm going to skip the poll just for time, sorry if you don't mind. But what blood would you select? I would be selecting A, little c neg, Big E neg, K neg, Duffy E neg for this patient because you want to come to your group O. You put the cross match up and typically one unit is incompatible. So you're like, oh no. So the question here is your cross match compatible by IAT? One of them is, but one of them's not. So we're going to say no. And it brings up a box here and it's just all little points that you might want to consider. It might be, have you selected the right patient sample? Have you selected the correct ABO? It might just be typical that there's something low incidence there that you haven't excluded, but in most cases, or the unit might be that positive, In most cases, selecting another unit for transfusion is going to resolve this. And then the last question asks, has consideration of the above resolved the incompatibility? So we put another unit up, great, this one's compatible. So yes, we've resolved the incompatibility and we can just input into our limbs. Yay, all done. So again, another really complicated case, which actually, if you just take a step back and just follow the steps and go through, can be resolved. So I hope that wasn't too much. Thanks everybody. Sorry it was a bit rushed.
No, that was great, Helen. Thank you so much. Any questions? That's brilliant.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Helen. It was such a great presentation. It's been really nice seeing and being able to explore the practical implications and applications of RCI Assist, and hear also how it's helping support the transfusion laboratories. And I really love the polls as well.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for taking part. I really appreciate it. We do have an MBTC webpage, so if you go on, it sits under the Transfusion 2024 page. I'll share the slides on there so you can go in and have a look. Thanks.